Let me begin my very short reflection today by asking you a question. Have you ever been bankrupt? You see, the dictionary defines the word bankrupt as a state of financial ruin. It's a link with terms like impoverished, insolvency, poverty, financial failure. It's also linked to words like destitute or deficient, poor, devoid, barren, empty. In other words, to be bankrupt is to have no profit and to gain nothing. In terms of our spiritual lives, becoming spiritually bankrupt is like being a Christian whose life does not reflect the life of Christ. In a sense, it's a type of Christianity without Christ. Devoid, empty, deficient, barren, bankrupt. It is a Christian life that is reduced to a spirituality without the presence, the character, and the life of Christ. You see, the opposite of spiritual bankruptcy is spiritual abundance. It's the full life that Jesus promised to each believer. This is the flourishing life that believers rooted in the reality of Christ in our lives. Paul, in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, talks about this bankruptcy of our spirituality when he said, no matter what I do, no matter what I believe, no matter what I know, without love, I gain nothing. I'm bankrupt. You see, in his letter to the Corinthians, he seems to suggest that the marks of spiritual abundance, the marks of spiritual fullness, is not great intelligence, it's not excellent ministry, and it's not impressive skills. Rather, it's the ability of the believer to relate well. I was reflecting on this and I was being beaten black and blue because this is a very, very sharp and powerful, eloquent rebuke by the Apostle Paul to the church in Corinth. The mark of a flourishing life is not our intellectual badges or ministry success, but our ability to relate well. To listen to those who hurt, to forgive those who sinned against us, to care for those who are in despair, to comfort those who are broken, to show grace to those who have failed or those who have offended us, and to encourage those who are feeling down. So while the mark of spiritual abundance is a life filled with love, the mark of spiritual bankruptcy is giftedness without love. It's knowledge without love. It's ministry without love. It's life without love. In other words, you can sense that you're going through bankruptcy, spiritually speaking, when you can say the right words, gain the right knowledge, do the right things with the wrong heart. Are you going through spiritual bankruptcy? Are there stages in your journey where you just feel, wow, it's a Christless Christianity? Chapter 13 is one of the most powerful passages in 1 Corinthians. If I could speak all the languages of the earth, Apostle Paul says, and of angels, but didn't I love others, I would only be a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. If I had a gift of prophecy, and if I understood all of God's secret plans, and possessed all knowledge, and if I had such faith that I could move mountains, but didn't I love others, I would be nothing. If I gave everything I have to the poor, and even sacrificed my body, I could boast about it, but if I didn't love others, I would have gained nothing. Oh! During the time of the apostles, the city of Corinth, which has about 400,000 inhabitants, was the chief city of Greece, filled with merchants, filled with tourists, and migrants and refugees, slaves, prostitutes, priests, politicians, scholars, and philosophers. It's a booming city. The Corinthian culture was predominantly shaped by the Greek and the Roman worldview. So, the Church of Corinth had many, many problems. It must be remembered that Corinth was one of the most wicked cities of ancient times, and that the church was surrounded by pagan customs and practices. And many Corinthian believers were recent converts from paganism to Christianity. So 1 Corinthians gives us a glimpse of the many, many problems the church is going through. We can learn from this letter that there were at least 4 factions among the believers. They're fighting among themselves. And there was gross immorality in the church. There was adultery and incest and fornication all over the church. And the believers had legal battles. They're suing one another. And they had many problems. And Paul was trying to address each of these problems in the Corinthian church. Particularly chapters 12 to 14, Paul was addressing the issue, the debate about spiritual gifts. See, many Corinthian believers were highly influenced by the Greek and Roman culture where eloquence, intelligence, knowledge, and giftedness are so much valued more than anything else. Chapter 13, the Apostle Paul seems to rebuke the believers about the emptiness and the bankruptcy of spiritual gifts without love. He argues that spiritual gifts such as speaking in tongues and the gift of prophecy and the gift of knowledge and the gift of doing miracles, they're all nothing and bankrupt and empty without love. In other words, our ability to relate well is far greater than any spiritual gift. All these gifts are temporary, but love lasts forever. Paul was trying to tell the Corinthian believers, the greatest of them all is love. Love should be your highest goal. And so what is really Paul talking about? What is he trying to tell believers? First, he says, impressive eloquence without love is nothing but empty noise. The Apostle Paul began attacking the problem of speaking in tongues. He mentions speaking the language of the angels. Because the Corinthian believers were fascinated with impressive gifts. That's the heart of their problem. They're fascinated with getting impressive gifts, but their relationships are filled with fighting and arguing and conflicts and hurting each other. You see, the word tongues of men refers to the languages spoken by human beings. Probably it's impressive when you have multiple languages, right? Wow, you can speak German, you can speak Mandarin too, and you can speak Filipino. Awesome! Impressive gift. But the tongues of angels, the language of heaven, the language of angels is high, it's much more impressive. It's ecstatic utterance. It's a higher level of language that only heaven can understand. It's possible that this gift is really all about exalted language that no average human being can understand. Only angels do. It's an impressive gift. Paul says, you have this gift. You don't have love, it's empty. Some writers have concluded that the tongues of angels or language of angels is a hyperbole or a figure of speech. It's a poetic language for something amazing. Like in verse 2, faith that can move mountains. It's hyperbole. It's a figure of speech on doing the impossible because of faith. This is also probably a hyperbole. It's like speak the mind of God, the language of God. Awesome. The Apostle Paul seems to say that even if one could speak in exalted language but did not act lovingly, his speech would be hollow and empty. Nothing but noise. Have you ever met someone like that? Speaks about God, speaks about the Bible, speaks about theology eloquently. It is hurtful, unloving. Paul says, you're like a clanging cymbal and a noisy gong. Have you ever heard a noisy cymbal? It doesn't make sense. The ancient times, pagan worship is filled with gongs and cymbals. In other words, you may be a gifted speaker and an eloquent preacher, but when you're unable to relate in a loving way to your spouse, to your children, to your family, to your friends, to your classmates, to your subordinates, or to other Christians, or to other human beings, then your impressive speech is just mere empty talk. You can sense that you are spiritually bankrupt when you speak the right words with the wrong one. One more aspect of this passage, very beautiful. Impressive knowledge without love is nothing but empty arrogance. Ooh, this is close to home. Why? Knowledge is very important in a seminary. The Apostle Paul showed that love is superior to any spiritual gifts. The spiritual gifts were listed in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Chapter 13, he says, all of these are nothing without love. You see here, the gift of prophecy, the knowing the future, is higher than glossolalia or speaking in tongues. But it was still inferior to love. Even the gift of understanding mysteries, or the gift of grasping divine truths or divine revelation revealed by God, this is amazing knowledge. But they're inferior to love. You see, having truth and knowledge without love are nothing. That's what he said also in 1 Corinthians 8. He says, knowledge puffs up. The word puffs up is, it makes you feel important. Knowledge makes you feel important. In the Philippines, we have a fascination with letters after our names. You know, your name, and then there's PhD, MDiv, MA, DVD, Blu-ray, everything after the name. It's a long name, pare. Amazing, impressive. Knowledge makes you feel important. You see, the possession of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom is not the sign of the Spirit-filled life. Have you ever reflected on that? Rather, it's loving behavior that is the sign of the Spirit-filled life. It seems that in this passage, Paul is saying that there are two views, two contrasting views on what it meant to be spiritual. For the Corinthians, being spiritual meant having all these impressive gifts like speaking in the language of the angels, having wisdom and knowledge, and having faith to do miracles and sacrificial service. But for Paul, being spiritual meant to walk in the Spirit, to walk like Christ, to walk in love. To be spiritual is to live with compassion, with kindness, with gentleness, with humility, to live a life of love. For the Corinthians, an A-plus Christian is one who has probably mastery of the Greek and the Hebrew, or excellent in understanding theology and Bible knowledge, good grades in preaching, impressive results in ministry, active church involvement, and an amazing set of skills and credentials. But for Paul, an A-plus Christian is one who is patient with others, one who is kind with others, one who is not envious, one who is not boastful, one who never gives up on others. It's very, very interesting. This hits me hard because I love knowledge. I'm a professor. But it's very interesting to know that the Bible did not say the fruit of the Spirit is correct beliefs, or the fruit of the Spirit is true doctrines, or the fruit of the Spirit is biblical knowledge and theological understanding. No. The fruit of the Spirit is love. It's very interesting. Jesus did not say, the world will know you are my disciples when you have correct theology. He didn't say, the world will know that you are mine if you have true beliefs and you have correct doctrines and you have this massive knowledge of the Bible. He says, the world will know you are my disciples when you love. That's why it breaks my heart. We split churches and we split hairs over theology and over doctrine. For what? While these things are important, is correct theology important? Yes. Is true doctrine important? Yes. Is Bible knowledge important? Yes. But love is more important. Love is the greatest, the Bible says. You can sense that you experience spiritual bankruptcy when you can know and understand the right beliefs with the wrong heart. See, intellectual beliefs can be a badge. It's like a sign of being spiritual. I always tell my friends, in IGSL during my time, and even in my classes, I say, what is an A+ in Christian marriage? When your wife hates you because you don't spend time with her, and you're very unloving and relating with her. What is an A+ in Christian parenting when your kids, they don't like you, you're not around? What's an A+ in a spirit-filled life class session in pneumatology class? When you live like a carnal person. What will you do with an A+ in transforming leadership class when your life is so unloving? There are many leaders, many pastors, many seminary graduates who are intellectually astute and who are impressive in their ministry but are spiritually bankrupt because they fail in relationships. That includes me. Let me tell you my story later on. I'm a repenting task person. I'm not a people person. I need to learn. Paul went on and he says, impressive faith without love is nothing but empty confidence. Can you imagine this? Even faith that can move mountains is not as important as love. A mountain is a universal symbol for something immovable, something difficult, something impossible. It's like you do the impossible, you do the miraculous because of faith. But you don't have love, you're nothing. You see, when we do the impossible and we accomplish the difficult and the miraculous in ministry, oh, impressive, amazing. But when we cannot live in harmony with our fellow believers or our family or our fellow leaders, even our greatest achievements in faith are nothing but empty ministry activities. Because we fail to love. Impressive ministries filled with hurtful and lovely relationships are empty ministries to God. How do you relate with people who are different from you? How do you relate with people who are lower than you? Or different from you because of the color of their skin or the shape of their eyes? Or because of their background? I propose that the true test of spirituality, the true test of greatness, is our ability to relate with. How do you relate with people who don't agree with you? Especially in theology. Greatness is love. Finally, Paul says, impressive sacrifice without love is nothing but empty service. Our sacrifice for others is not the same as real love. Self-sacrifice is important, yet it is inferior to love. Even the Apostle Paul says his personal sufferings for the salvation of others, they're worthless if not done without love. Even our sacrifice through martyrdom, you give your life for somebody else, is valueless in the sight of God if it was not done out of love. So you can sense. You're experiencing spiritual bankruptcy. It's the Christless Christianity. You know the right things, you say the right things, and you do the right things with the wrong heart. The Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians seems to suggest that the mark of spiritual abundance is not great intelligence, it's not excellent ministry, and not impressive skills. Rather, the mark of a flourishing life in Christ is our ability to relate well, to listen to those who hurt, to forgive those who sinned, to care for those who despair, to comfort those who are broken, to show grace to those who are hurtful, or irritable, or offensive, to encourage those who are feeling down, or to love those who hate you, to love those who disagree with you, especially if they're fellow believers. Well, the mark of spiritual abundance is a life filled with love. The life mark of spiritual bankruptcy is giftedness without love. It's knowledge without love. It's ministry without love. It's a life without love. Let me tell you my story. Let me end with my own journey. I lack relationship skills. I grew up as a loner. Give me a book or an MP3 player, I will survive 24 hours without connecting to another human being. That's me. I live in a cave. You can ask my wife. And of course, I have high IQ, but I have low EQ. I don't have relationship skills. I'm a task person, but I'm not a people person. I don't like people. I don't like parties. I don't like gatherings. I don't like connecting with human beings. I don't know if that's the D in me, but problem is God called me to be a leader. That means I have to relate. I realized, somebody rebuked me. Somebody said, the best way to excel as a leader is to excel in relationships. Excellent people are relationship experts. The only way you can love God is when you love others. More than my intellectual sharpness or ministry success, it's my ability to relate to God. So I started repenting. I started, asking for help. I read books after books. How do you become a people person? How do you connect with another human being? How do you listen? How do you apologize? How do you love the unlovable? How do you deal with difficult people? How do you sustain a friendship, a relationship? You have good grades, you have good ministry, you have good knowledge. You don't know how to love. Paul says, you're nothing. Let's pray. Thank you, Lord. You call us to the highest call. The greatest call is to love you, to love others. As we close our series, the whole semester about loving you and loving others, help us to be the leaders that you want us to be. Help us to be the husband, the wife that you want us to be. Help us to be the pastors that you want us to be. Help us, Lord God, to be the believers that you want us to be. Heal your church, Lord. Heal our families, Lord. Heal our seminaries, Lord. Heal our groups and relationships and all our organizations and denominations. Break our arrogance and help us relate well, especially with the people you love, the church. In Jesus' name, amen.